First of all, let me say Happy New Year. And this is our first meeting of 2022. It is certainly my personal hope and desire that for each of the board members and everyone else, that it was a good holiday season for you, that you were able to enjoy family and friends, to maybe overindulge a little bit. And so now it's time to get back in shape and get back to the work at hand. And so just thank you all for being here today. And we will get started. The very first item on our agenda would be the approval of the minutes from last month. Is there a motion to approve? I need a hand just so I can say. Thank you from Mark Fluharty. And a second? And a second there. Any questions or concerns? Then all in favor of the approval of the minutes, please raise your hand. Thank you. We're going to jump right into our business of the day. We have a special guest who might be with us for 2 meetings, but definitely all day today, and that's Karen Clark from the Office of Human Resources. Hopefully you all had the ability to participate by taking the test that was shared. I won't go into great detail, but I was a little concerned. But Ms. Clark has indicated to me that once she explains that my concerns will be taken care of. So Karen, and I think Kenston Henderson. Is Kenston here?
He's unable to join us today.
Okay, all right. The topic is implicit bias training. And again, this is a topic that's mandated by the statute, as well as in the future, we will, someone from this office will cover DEI and cultural competency. So the floor is yours, Ms. Clark.
Thank you very much. And we'd like to thank you for partnering with us. Our office is specifically citywide training and development. We are a part of the general HR department. Our director is Nicole Brandon. And as Chair Jackson mentioned, yes, today's topic is implicit bias. And yes, we will be joining you again to discuss cultural competency a little later. So just to start, you'll see on the screen there we have 5 topics that we'll be discussing today. The first topic will be what is implicit bias, where we will be breaking that down. Second, we'll look at a few types of biases. Third, we will discuss how implicit biases affects our actions and decisions. Fourth, we will talk about the implicit association test, also known as the IAT. And finally, we will be addressing how to deal with implicit bias. So let's jump right in.
Instantaneously, where we sit on a bus, or who we assume is in charge and who is the assistant upon entering an office. Where do those decisions come from? Why do certain things just feel right? Certain people more or less approachable? Although sometimes these instant choices can feel like magic, they aren't. It's your brain working, often unconsciously, to make a decision based on all your previous experiences. Or in other words, based on biases and how we see the world around us. Bias has a number of negative connotations. Prejudice, bigotry, or hatred, things we don't want to be associated with. But at their core, biases are simply mental shortcuts. They are a tool with which we categorize the familiar and unfamiliar, the safe and the dangerous, and anything else we impulsively react to. These impulsive reactions are instrumental to our survival. We have to automatically know that a tiger is dangerous. We can't analyze every particular tiger we come across before finally deciding to run. They also make basic functioning significantly more efficient. Instead of spending hours deducing that the green and red shapes you're seeing are apples, you've already categorized them as apples and instantly gravitated to the Granny Smiths you like. It frees up your mental bandwidth to think about more complex things, create new things, or At the very least, binge watch things on Netflix. So, contrary to common belief, having biases isn't inherently bad. What makes them bad is when they cause false assumptions, ones we aren't consciously aware of. Admitting to having unconscious bias is hard because it may seem like it holds implications for the kind of person you are. But really, it's about how you think. The more aware we are of our thought process, the more we can truly see the world and the people around us.
So I'd like to move forward with breaking down the phrase implicit bias. The phrase implicit bias has become a buzz phrase that has really lost its meaning. So I'd like to break it up first by defining the word implicit. So we have the definition there. It is an adjective. The meaning is implied rather than expressly stated. So implied thoughts come from our subconscious mind versus explicit thoughts that are in our conscious mind. Just think of an example. Implied thoughts might be conveyed with a look versus a statement. You can give a look to a friend of yours or a partner, whether it is a happy thought or maybe a partner has left some dishes on the counter versus in the sink. So just imagine what that implied look might be versus that comment. Next, the word bias. The word bias gets a bad rap, okay? When people think of the word bias, they automatically think it's bad, but the actual definition, it's a noun. It means prejudice in favor of or against. People forget about the favor part of it. So it could be in favor of or against one thing, person, or group when compared with another, sometimes in a way considered to be unfair. So by sheer virtue of the differences in the human experience, we each harbor bias in some way because we all bring something a little different to the table. Okay, so I really like to focus on the favor or unfavorable part of it. It could sometimes be considered a preference. You know, with Ohio State, for instance, okay, we pulled that game out in the end, but, you know, with that team up north, for some reason, I don't know why, my son is a fan of Michigan. I know, right? I graduated from Ohio State. So my son has a favorable bias for Michigan. I have a favorable bias towards Ohio State. And I have an unfavorable bias towards Michigan. He has an unfavorable bias towards Ohio State. So that's bidirectional bias. It can go both ways. So I like to really focus on that. That is not just a bad thing. So again, that's bias. So when we put it together, implicit bias, also known as unconscious bias, also known as implicit social cognition or implicit association. An implicit association would be something like peanut butter and jelly. We automatically think many people, when we think peanut butter, most people automatically think jelly. Am I right? All right, but it also refers to attitudes and stereotypes, again, favorable or unfavorable, typically activated involuntarily, and because it's unconscious or implicit, it resides in our subconscious. So moving on, I'd like to just review a few types of biases. Now, when we talk about biases, who are the usual suspects with biases? Board, you want to popcorn them out to me? When we first talk about biases, what do people usually think about? race, age, gender. Give me two more. Sorry?
Sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation. Where you're from. Okay, thank you. So we have gender, race, religion is usually one that pops up a lot, and maybe culture. So all of what you mentioned, and these as well. The Usual Suspects is one of my favorite movies. But again, these are usually the ones when people think about bias, but there are so many more. Now, what I have here is what's called a diversity wheel. The inside of this wheel is showing us what we are born with. And I know it's a little small there, but in our diversity wheel and what we're born with, of course, includes age. It includes our race and ethnicity. It includes our social status and need glasses, gender identity. The outside of the wheel are what we gain in our lives. So, as we grow up, we attain maybe a political belief, an organizational role. We attain communication skills, a particular religion. Those things can change. Our appearances can change. Our work experiences can change. Our education can change. But those things are also subject to biases. Here, I'd like to list some additional biases. Beauty bias. Here we have beauty bias can relate to how a person looks. So I have a couple of examples there, Charlize Theron and Idris Elba, for instance. But in other cases, there have been studies where people who are considered attractive have more opportunities, where companies will hire and or put the most attractive people. They might have them be their front-facing employees. There was a case some years ago where some employees sued Hooters because Hooters didn't hire them because they didn't look good enough. That Dilbert cartoon there, and who doesn't like Dilbert, okay? But there is some evidence there. It says 60% of CEOs in the US are over 6 feet tall. Only 15% of the total population is over 6 feet tall. This illustrates bias in terms of how we perceive how a CEO should look. So in this Dilbert cartoon, the boss says, "Dilbert, I'd like for you to meet Ben, our newest fast-track manager." Dilbert says hi. Ben has no real experience, but he's very tall, so we know he'll go far. And the new manager guy says, "I also have executive-style hair." And the manager says, "And we think it'll turn silver." So, I'm a little insulted because, I'm 5'1", so I'm like totally out of the running. Plus, I'm not a male. But for those gentlemen who are under 6 feet, what choice do you have? But there are statistics that show that CEOs, many of them are over 6 feet tall. That's beauty bias. Of course, we often hear about gender bias, a tendency of unfair treatment of all genders because of their sex. Now, if we just look at men and women, both have experienced and perpetrated gender bias. Typically, we only hear about gender bias being perpetrated from men to women. But there are studies that show that some women have perpetrated gender bias towards men. Another topic that we hear about is the disparity in income. The last statistic that I saw was that women made 81 cents to every dollar that a man made. Now, to be clear, that's white women to men. And of course, then depending on the ethnicity, the amount goes down, I think down to Hispanic women making approximately 54 cents to every dollar that a man made. Confirmation bias is another type of bias that we hear a lot of. It favors information which confirms previous existing beliefs or biases. So instead of looking for truth that may go against what you already believe, you're looking for and only listening to information that confirms what you already believe. So if you consider the Venn diagram there, you have objective facts, and then what confirms your belief is that intersecting area in the middle is what you see. So an example I use is, believe it or not, there are some people that still believe that the earth is flat. In fact, they just recently, as of I believe last year, had a conference again in Las Vegas. So, am I right?
You're right.
Yeah, with that. So they believe it, and they're going to conferences, and they're reading information about that. Try not to be snarky. But if the earth is flat, who lives on the edge? That's my question. Okay. Another bias is linguistic bias. Linguistic bias is a type of language bias, and it's towards speakers of other languages from other countries or dialects, or towards people who are bilingual. And in my presentation of this information for another department with the city, a young lady, I believe she's from Ghana, who just moved to the United States several years ago. And she said when she first came over, she was in nursing school, and she didn't really speak much, but she brought up a situation where she had taken a test in the nursing school, and she got her test results back, and she scored an A. She said her instructors were very surprised because she didn't speak much in class. But she said she didn't speak much because she had been derided because of her accent. But somehow they correlated her not speaking much or her accent with her not being intelligent, which was not the case. That's a linguistic bias, which I find interesting when you see that a lot. In my experience, usually people who come from foreign countries, not only do they speak their own language, they speak English and several other languages as well. Here's a brief list of some other types of biases. Conformity bias relates to bias caused by group peer pressure. Affinity bias, we know the word affinity means to like, and it's a tendency to warm up to and trust people like ourselves. Now, that just doesn't apply to, what my gender is or what my perceived race or ethnicity might be. It could be that, I'm in HR and I like people in HR more than I like people in the Department of Public Utilities. So I try to make sure that people aren't thinking narrow-mindedly when they think of affinity bias. Halo and the horns effect. We see one good or bad thing about a person that colors their judgment about the group that we perceive them to belong to. There's zip code bias, or location or geographic bias, however you would like to categorize that, which is a set of beliefs about a particular area being better or worse than another, and therefore may suffer or benefit accordingly. can you all give me some examples of how that might manifest? Yes.
I know a lot of times we have gang wars and stuff, and one person believes that their particular area is better than another person's area, or they warn others not to cross into their area, you know. And I think many times, you know, what bothers me is in many of those cases, neither group owns anything in the area.
Okay, yes. Yes.
Real estate, when folks are looking for places to move, it's often telling the real estate agent, I'm going to move to a place that has good schools, which is often coded for a neighborhood that has a specific racial makeup or that doesn't have a particular racial makeup, because so often zip code, housing prices, and the school systems are all interrelated.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Piggyback on Ruth's, I believe that there was a kind of a scandal where, because of people's zip codes, people weren't getting loans in those zip codes and weren't able to actually buy homes. And I think that would be sort of a little example of that.
Yes.
If I could follow up, historically, I think you're referring to redlining. So literally, almost done by our government, but there were certain communities that were redlined. And we've done a lot of research here in Columbus, I'd say in the last 7 to 10 years, that says that some of those communities still feel the effects of being redlined. There's still some of the neighborhoods that have the greatest challenges in Franklin County.
That was done by the government.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Mark?
Yeah, I'm from Appalachia, so, you know, when I moved to the city and still today, I still feel the effects of that, especially when we talked about accent before. You know, I got a heavy Appalachian accent, so people tend to assume that I'm, you know, just a good old hillbilly, and I'm much more.
From the holler?
Oh, yes. Deep in the holler.
Right, right. And speaking of redlining, I have a deed. I live up north, and I have a restrictive covenant in my deed. It's a really interesting historical document. So I was the first person of color to buy that house. It's a post-World War II house, and best believe I river danced in the house. But the deed, that particular covenant actually said no person of color could buy that house unless they were a servant. So it's very interesting. Some other things that affect where you live are let's see, food deserts, whether or not you can get pizza delivered to you, rates on your insurance, mortgage interest rates. So there's a number of things that can affect you depending on where you live, including, like you said, schools. Just recently, the Kerwin Center did work with Zach Klein's office, I believe it was, in terms of appraisals. That was an interesting study that they just did a webinar about. So if you haven't seen that study, I would recommend that you go and look at that as well. Let's see. And the last thing, well, not last, but there are many more types of biases, but age bias, unfair treatment in recruiting or granting promotions or privileges on the basis of age. Now, I have a question for you. When you think of age bias, what do you think about?
Generally, anyone over, I don't know, 70 or whatnot, that folks now think that they're not going to be as fast at work. They're not going to be able to keep up with, you know, younger folks, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that may be like the stereotype that I've heard before. So.
Okay. Yes. And anyone else?
I'm just the opposite. I do have age bias because I think it's time for old people to get out of the road.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
At least you're honest about it.
What?
At least you're honest about it.
So,
Very honest about it, and especially little white males.
Age ain't never mind over matter if you don't mind.
Sort of.
Okay.
there's just generational biases where stereotypes are associated with, different generations. Millennials are like this, Gen Xers are like this, boomers are like that. And so there's a set of stereotyped characteristics associated with a generation.
That could be bi-directional as well.
Yeah, it goes
That can be
in
bi-directional
positive
as
and
well.
negative, yeah, for sure.
Because sometimes young people perceive us as being something that we're not. Good example, I never will forget, I was probably about 55 at the time. My grandson and I were playing, and he was probably about 18, and he was going to call himself going to go ahead and get a good sucker punch in and take off and run. Well, when he was laughing, but when he looked back, I was right there with him at age 55, so.
An example of age bias is really the belief that young people and children have no agency. And so you make decisions without considering how these affect them or their feelings towards the decisions that you're making on their behalf.
You are all correct in that. Even facilitating this information, I was checked by an evaluation I got back after a session because, like many of you, I always thought age bias was always about older people. But in one of the evaluations, as I was reading it, they said, yes, age bias affects everyone, but also millennials. I was like, wait, what? And the person went on to state that because they don't respect my knowledge. And I was like, wow, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. Just like you all have said, we don't respect their agency. And sometimes it's hard for us when we are working with people that are the same age as perhaps our children or our nieces and nephews. So we have to think about those things. How many generations do we have in the workforce now? 5, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right, it is bi-directional, where they think, some young people think they know everything, some older people think they know everything. So, and we also offer a class on that, we being Citywide Training and Development, so that we can get the generations to work together. In some of the other sessions that I help facilitate, for instance, I also facilitate the Microsoft Office classes, and of course with city employees, they're older, and they come into the classes feeling bad because many of them, of course, didn't grow up with computers, and they feel, I'm never gonna get this, or they say, I always have to ask my nephew, grandchild, whatever it is, how to do this, and I feel bad when I have to ask them. I always make sure to remind them, don't forget who taught them how to use a fork, okay? So you have value as well. Or wait, give them a paper map and take them somewhere and ask them to get back just using that paper map without a GPS. So we all have value. But it's very important when we think of age bias. So I just like to, give everyone the opportunity to know that they have value. Yes?
I really like what Aaron said. I was babysitting for my 3-year-old granddaughter just this week and noticed that myself and her parents, were having a conversation in front of her, and I was looking at her face for a minute and noticed the look on her face that she was in the room, knew what we were saying, and had left her out at age 3. And from then on, I decided that will never happen again, because she's in the room and she should be treated. So it goes very young.
Yes.
To be aware of not giving them agency giving them the respect due that young.
Yes. So you just saw it on her face.
Saw that on her face. It was crystal clear that we were giving her no respect in that room. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, they are definitely fast forward these days.
But I'm curious as to Mr. Fluharty's remark, at when do we get out of the way? When do old people get out of the way?
Well, Mary, you know, that's a good question, because the baby boomers have had their time since World War II, and look at the shape the country's in. So I'm all for, hey, I'm an old guy. I'm an old white guy. It's time to get out of the road and let these youngsters take over. I'd love to see the women take over. It can only get better.
But doesn't it depend on the individual? Because there's some.
You can say that about any generation. I really have a bad bias to, and this is my third time through implicit bias training, but I found out right off the bat that looking back at the younger generations, I've already got a bias of, you're this age group, you don't work, you're lazy, you don't show up on time, and, you know, something to work on. But every generation has that. We've had over 50, or actually 70 years now to do it. Look at the shape we're in.
But keep in mind, even with the baby boomers, it spans, you said from World War II, but it spanned from there.
I'm the last of them, 1963.
Okay, yeah, even a little further later than that, though, a few years. Well, it depends on what statistics you're looking at, what research you're looking at. It could extend to like 1966. So, but I like you. Let the women take over. I like him.
Hey, it's all about it.
About that as well. I mean, not that there should be a certain amount of time, but I do think that logically we should be asking ourselves, why are 70-year-olds, 75-year-olds making laws about climate change, for example? So to that point, I do believe that, you know, the generation that it is actually affecting should actually have more of the say in actual legislation and how things will be changing moving forward, because it is going to be their world. To his point, I actually have had that thought before. Like, I'm 45 years old. I'm ready to step down and get out of somebody's way. You know, eventually it's not going to affect me at all. So, right there.
Very interesting. I like that. Big old spoon stirring it up.
See if you had another bias there, and I realize it can't be exhaustive.
Right.
But I noticed one that has been missing, and that's the one around someone's size. And it really hit me this morning. So I guess tonight is the beginning of the final year of the program, This Is Us. And evidently that program has had an impact on many different thoughts. But of course, if you've ever seen the program, one of the children, the woman, has a significant size. And so I'm just wondering, and I won't be able to get an answer to this, has her participation in this television show changed folks' minds or given them a different way of thinking about things? And so, and I'll give you an example. As they were talking about the impact on them, the gentleman who plays Sterling, who is African American, was looking back and said how so I guess his daughter announced, she came out, and how he has been stopped in airports and other places by private citizens just saying to him, the way you handle that had an impact, you know, on me. And of course we know that. But I'm just guessing that in this country, and maybe you take it back to beauty, because that was one, the individuals who have, whether it's, you know, significant weight issues or other issues, are they still on a daily basis dealing with biases?
Absolutely.
When I was very first appointed to this committee, someone inside the mayor's office said, "Who's the big white guy on the committee?" Absolutely, it's still part of every day.
I don't know if anyone listens to the radio but me. I still listen to the radio in my car. I don't know if you all noticed, I think on 107.5 or 105.6, at the beginning of this year, they actually started airing weight bias commercials. Like they were saying, oh, when, I'm not going to try to recap the commercial, but it wasn't like a weight loss product or a gym product, but it was just a be mindful of the people in the room that you're with commercial. And that shocked me because I had never heard anything like that on the radio, but it made me pay attention. And so I do think it is a conversation that is beginning. The fact that people are paying for these ads to run to get them conversations started, I do believe it is something that we're at the beginning of seeing a shift in the way that we talk about people and bodies in our culture.
Thank you for bringing that up. And yes, weight bias, we do touch on that sometimes in the session. I'm disappointed to hear that, but we could umbrella that under beauty bias, because conversely, while some companies will put their best looking people up front, there is research that says someone who is larger, they're not going to be up front. They actually, and I've read studies where they actually make less money. They are considered to be lazy. It's really unfortunate. And that's awesome. I don't listen to the radio very much, but I'm encouraged to hear
And you know,
that.
I know it's not, it may not, depending on the industry that you're in, it may not be considered a bias, but if anyone has recently had to go through, you know, signing up for health insurance at a job, there's all of these biometric screenings that you have to do and levels that you have to meet that determine how much insurance you pay, right? So if your blood pressure is this or your BMI is that, this, that, and the third, that changes the amount of insurance you have to pay, right? And so that could be, you know, and also even things like getting dental care and eyesight, when a lot of people have not even had access to those things, you might have to pay a higher premium or more and more. So it is really insidious the way that these kind of biases about our physical traits and nature are kind of just sewn into the fabric of our existence without really interrogating what does that actually mean for people, you know?
Right. And think of how Lizzo is treated, where the entertainer Lizzo, where, you know, she talks about body positivity and saying, you know, she's healthy, but then there are always people that say she's not healthy. Who would know besides her, she and her doctor? So there is, sorry?
Social media.
Social media, right. So, very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up.
So let's go to the flip side of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? I remember I was in uniform, and I couldn't get another part on. I had my hat, my coat, my badge, my gun, everything. And some nice ladies approached me, nice ladies, but the first question was, are you a police officer? So I mean, and so I said, well, why would you think I'm not? And she said, well, usually police officers are big and so forth. And another thing, too, listen, you know how many times people have said to me, you know, and maybe they meant it in a complimentary way, but they say, oh, you are skinny. And I have to put the brakes. Listen, it's called lean, right? So, you know, I check them because you don't know how I feel about that. Now, I feel great about it, but you don't know. So that it works both ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought about a few years ago, it's probably been about 10 years ago, when American Idol used to be on, and one of the biases that one of the owners of it had was he would never want to promote someone, regardless of how good their voice may have been, based on their body style. And Jennifer Hudson was one of the ones that was on there at that particular time. and she was railed by this particular individual because of her body type. So she did not make it through, but then she turns out to be one of the greatest singers of our time. And, you know, he had to end up going back and apologizing to her because he said she would never make it in the industry based on what she looked like. You know, so it's definitely, that was a good point. That was a very good point.
Right. And it was also one of the categories on the implicit association test as well. So there's a lot of research behind that. So thank you for bringing that up. Last but certainly not least, because there is an exhaustive list of biases, we have biased language. And that's made up of words or phrases that might make certain people or groups feel excluded or underrepresented. Now, this is similar but different from linguistic biases. So biased language includes expressions that demean or exclude people because of age, sex, race, ethnicity, or social class, physical or mental traits.
Divorced black housewife. Well, what part of being a single white slacker makes you people so jaded?
Ooh, you people? What do you mean, you people? Cannot believe I got to say that.
It's the little things, isn't it?
So the dreaded phrase, what do you mean, you people? That's a loaded phrase for some people. Can you all think of any other phrases that might be considered biased language? Your generation, or like you said, Mark, who's the big guy?
Yep.
Biased language. Your kind, very similar to you people. Yes.
It's not language, but it's something that's always kind of been bothersome. When you're with a group of people and they're going to talk about somebody else, they lower their voice. They look around and then they're going to tell a joke, and it's either an ethnic joke or a joke about black people. And they look around the room and then they lower their voice. Or they're going to say something about a black person and they lower their voice. That's very disturbing because you want to run out of the room and you're stuck. You know, but that's a thing that people tend to do.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable because you're ready to figure out, oh, what do I do? You know,
Right.
You're in situations that you can't run out of the room. Yeah.
Yes.
That perpetuates stereotypes. So without going through a list, but the stereotypical microaggressions that people use that they work into colloquial language, like saying, let's have a powwow, or lowest rung on the totem pole, like things that are culturally significant, and yet we then use them or appropriate them in ways that are not at all honoring to the cultures that they've come from.
That's an excellent point. Generationally, sometimes we use those things, but then times change, and sometimes people don't realize they need to be told, and they need to be open to understanding that things have changed and be able to change. Self-report, you know, in my generation, we'd say things like, you know what, that's retarded. It took one of my good friends to come into my office and say, you know, hey, Karen, not cool. And I appreciated her doing that. So I took that out of my lexicon. Right, yeah.
Oh, you're so articulate, you know.
Let's finish the phrase.
Yes, yes.
A professor said to me, you're so articulate for a Black person.
Part is just said in the brain. Like it stays.
Yeah. Well,
it's implied heavily, but
No, she said the whole thing to me. And then in the session I was telling people about that, I asked them, how could that have affected me had I not spoken to that professor? It was about a grade. Well, it could have affected my GPA, which could have affected my ability to graduate on time, which could have affected my grants or scholarships, my future job prospects. So it is a ripple effect. And I don't want to put on her that she did it maliciously, but that's what she thought. And she, like, it wasn't implicit, she was explicit with it. So those types of comments. Or, but you don't look gay. What does gay look like? So that type of biased language that we need to be careful of, but again, sometimes generationally, some people don't realize what they're saying is harmful because that's what they grew up with.
And we need to acknowledge that sometimes within our own race or culture, so I had a staff member at United Way question me on one particular day because in my ensemble, I was wearing a beautiful black rolled straw hat. It was a part of the ensemble. And she questioned my wearing the hat. And I asked her, so when you go to church on Sunday, do you wear a hat? Yes. Do you take it off when you get to church? Well, of course, no. I said, it's the same thing. And she looked at me and she says, but you have good hair.
Oh.
Now, for some of us sitting around the room, we know what we're talking about. Of course, I have no hair now. But that type of thing we can do to each other
Yes.
within our own culture or race.
Yes.
Again, well, you are fair-skinned. I mean, we could go down the list.
Right.
But many times we fail to acknowledge that within, again, our own race, that we still have issues that we need to work on.
Absolutely. Yeah. That we could have a whole Oprah show on that. Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. Couldn't have done this, 5-10 years ago at work? Even some people in my family now. Why are you wearing your hair like that? So, all right, and a little tie up to types of biases. We've been looking at some biases that we might recognize in others, but here's a warning. People are sometimes biased against the view that their own judgments are biased. This is known as bias or bias blind spot.
Considering her as a candidate.
Just don't trust
She's a woman.
She's a woman.
This is a man's job.
She's clearly not educated. Really? Does she even speak English?
That's not me. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume. Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who we turn to for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Who can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you, with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
So again, blind spots are about ourselves. Oh, hold on. Don't want to play that again. So they covered our mind uses shortcuts. We'll be covering that some more. Our choices have consequences. And we all do have blind spots. While we're pointing the finger at other people, we can't forget, you know the old saying, as we're pointing, the thumb is pointing back at us. So we all do have those blind spots, and we should check those blind spots and focus on what is possible for us. Now, this might be a good time before we move on to section 3 to take a brief break, if that's good for you. Chair Jackson?
2 hours.
Another 2
And
hours?
That's why I try to do, how long do you think the next portion would take? Again, it depends on the conversation, doesn't it? I'd go a little bit longer.
All righty.
Okay.
We can do that. Let's move ahead. How implicit bias affects our actions and decisions. So, question for you. Where do you all get your news? Go ahead and let me know. Where's that?
TikTok.
TikTok?
Right there.
Okay. PBS. That's okay. It doesn't have to be on there.
The Young Turks.
Cenk? I appreciate him.
Yeah, me too.
And Anna? Yeah?
Fox News.
What is it?
Fox News.
Box Dave?
Fox.
Box.
Fox News.
Okay. Fox.
Just kidding, everybody. Just kidding.
No, it's on there. Hey, we don't discriminate. Right.
You know, NPR.
NPR.
Stuff from
Love NPR. MSNBC.
I still, don't laugh, I still read the daily newspaper here in town.
What?
I also watch local news.
What?
National news. And I'm an MSNBC person.
Okay. Wait, do you get the actual paper?
Pardon?
Do you get the actual paper?
My paper is delivered to my home, and I get it digitally.
Okay.
But in terms of starting out this new year, the approach has been to wake up with intentionality, spend some meditation, go get a cup of coffee, grab the paper, and come back and read my paper before I truly start my day.
Okay.
It's late, we all know, because it's printed at about 6 o'clock, but anyway.
All right.
But I still read it, because there's still some in-depth things in there about our local community that I want to know more about.
All right. Any?
I feel the same way about reading like the New York Times and the Washington Post. I think the best articles are the ones that aren't current, but the ones that either people have written in long form about, or the exposés or the investigative reporting. I think that's why the newspaper is still really important for those kind of things.
All right. Anybody else? Twitter, podcasts. Now, usually I get somebody saying mom. That's why I put it up there.
Saying what?
Mom. I've had,
Your mother?
yes.
So my mom will turn 88 in March. She lives a mile from me. And I will tell you, when I go to visit her, she's asking me the tough questions about what is or is not going on in our community. So for example, she's really listened to what is happening with our young people, the good, bad, and everything else, but she puts me on the spot because it's like, Janet, who's going to do something about this? So yes.
She's up to date. All
She's
right.
also very active on Facebook.
Oh, is she? Okay. All right. All right, so there is a method to the madness. So as the blind spot video mentioned about the amount of information we take in, Pragwa Argawal wrote a book called Sway. She also stated that the human brain takes in 11 million bits of information per second. But our conscious mind can only process between 40 and 50 bits of information per second. Mine probably about 10. Okay, so that leaves about 10,999,950 remaining bits of information from all the media that we take in, whether it's what your friends talk about, what you hear on the radio, what you see in your Twitter thread, or the podcast, or what you hear your coworkers talking about. You don't even realize what you're taking in. It's like the air you breathe. And that's how you can make decisions or have thoughts in your unconscious without even really knowing that you do. You should also understand that our brains are actually built for bias. We oftentimes think of bias as this ethereal type of concept, but it's physical. Doctors have actually seen on MRIs when bias actually happens. Let me ask you, what happens when you're in a state of fear to your body? What happens? Adrenaline release.
Flight or fight.
Right?
It narrows your vision. You get tunnel vision so that you actually, police officers who are, in a tense situation will actually develop tunnel vision and remove all other important information. So, they saw that with the Diallo shooting in New York, where there were something like, 85 shots fired at a guy who he was taking out his cigarettes.
Or cell phone or something?
I think
His
what's that?
wallet?
His wallet, yeah, but I think he was standing on the porch smoking, wasn't he? Anyway, but the shots were all over the place. I mean, the result was, amygdala overload that then creates tunnel vision so that you can't take in important information.
Right, tunnel vision. What else happens to your body?
Sometimes.
Rigid. What else?
Heart races.
Heart races. Sweating. All of that. So you do have a physical response. The amygdala is the oldest part of our brain, also called the reptilian part of our brain. It's what kept ancient man from being eaten. Ancient man, of course, with the amygdala, kept other groups away from their group. They had to determine the fear and the threat. So they responded with quick, strong actions. That fear and anxiety is what that gut instinct is. And it's what some scientists call fast brain or system 1. There is a system 2 or a slow brain, but for today's session, we're just going to talk about system 1. So the defining characteristics of system 1 is it happens unconsciously, effortless, and it's automatic. So if you see a tiger, you don't want to have to stop and analyze whether you should run, okay? You just know, you've been taught, your amygdala is telling you, okay, tiger, let's get out of here. And you do that without the analysis paralysis. What you see is all there is. So the role of the amygdala is to assess the situation and deliver updates. So again, bias isn't bad. We are built for it. If you are human, you have biases. So I like to let people know that. Not to say that this lets you off the hook, but understand that this is how we're built. So I'd like for you to watch this video, and if you have something to write with, I'd like for you to note how many biases you see. Mr. Blunt, could you move that way a little bit? Thank you. I was trying to get to the play button. How many biases did you identify in that video? A lot, right? Have any of you ever seen Kim's Convenience? Pretty funny. Yeah, if you haven't, it's on Netflix now. Unfortunately, they've stopped filming. They filmed it in Canada. But it's a great segue into our next concept, which is warmth and competence. So what you see here is a matrix. And these are stereotypes. Okay, I want to really emphasize that they are stereotypes. So on our vertical axis, we have warmth, low here at the bottom and high. On our horizontal axis, we have competence, low and high. So in our upper left-hand corner, we have the the paternalistic stereotype. In this stereotype, for example, we have housewives, elderly people, and disabled people. So they're saying low status and not competitive. Now, I put the question to you. First of all, housewives, an outdated concept, but housewives, elderly people, and disabled people. Really? Do they have low competence and high warmth? So when we talk about warmth, we're talking about, are they friendly, or competence, the ability to do a job? Would you say that, according to what they're calling them, housewives, elderly people, and disabled people?
Is that the warmth of the person in the example, or our warmth towards that group? I think it's
Of
it's
the
our
people
warmth
in that
towards that
quadrant.
group, isn't it?
Of the people in that quadrant. So do housewives, elderly people, and disabled people, are they happy people? Are they friendly people? And do they have low competence? Do they not have the ability to perform a job?
Is the warmth of the observer or that group? Because it's hard to imagine that people think that elderly people or housewives are warm people, but you might feel warm towards those people because they have low status.
No, we're talking about those people. Are they friendly? Not what we feel towards them. We'll take just one of them, disabled people. Are they friendly? Depends on the person.
Real Housewives, they're not very warm.
And they're also not housewives, right?
That's right.
And that's it too. I've talked to some people in recreation and parks who work in some of the centers that are the senior centers, and they're like, they're not. So let me back up a little bit. So 2 human traits govern social judgments, and they shape our emotions and behaviors towards individuals and groups. So when we talk about warmth, what are their intentions towards me? So let me go to another quadrant. The contemptuous stereotype, and that's in the lower left-hand corner. So the lower left-hand corner, they have low competence, which is the ability to carry out intentions or job, and low warmth, meaning they're not very friendly. So the stereotype are people who are welfare recipients or poor people. The stereotype is that welfare recipients and poor people are not very friendly and they have low competence. So that's the stereotype of those people. We know that that's not correct. It's a stereotype. The envious stereotype in the bottom right-hand corner. According to this matrix, they have high competence, Asians, Jews, rich people, and feminists. They have high competence and low warmth. So they're not very friendly, but they have high competence. And that's a stereotype. So what I'd like for us to do is an exercise, and this is something that I'll need for you to write down. So let me move forward. I'd like for you, on your papers, to write down this matrix. You have 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, and the columns W and C. So the W column is for warmth. The C is for competence. And I'm going to have 3 contestants, and I'm going to show you their pictures, and I'm going to ask you, just by looking at their pictures, whether you think they have high warmth, meaning they look friendly, or low warmth, meaning they do not look friendly, and the same for competence, whether they look like they can do a job, whatever job you think that they can do, and no, we don't have their resumes, but scientists say we look at people and make a determination about them within 3 to 5 seconds. So again, with competence, I'm going to want you to look at these people and give them an H for high competence or an L for low competence. Now, the people in the picture, some of them are famous, some of them are infamous, and I'm going to ask you not to shout out their names if you recognize them. The first person we're going to use as an example. And then for the next 2, I'm going to give you about 5 to 8 seconds. So you all have your matrix ready? All right. So here's contestant number 1. So I want you to put in the W column whether or not you think he has high warmth or low warmth, high competence or low competence, based on whatever job you think you see him fulfilling. Okay, any questions before I go to contestant number 2? All right, contestant number 2. Remember, you're only going to have about 5 seconds. Remember, no shout outs. And contestant number 3. All right, we're back to contestant number 1. Now, how many of you gave this contestant high warmth? Just two? Three? A question mark?
Absolutely, I didn't go the whole binary thing.
Okay.
No, I've lived next to this gentleman. I've been friends with this gentleman. Whatever, I don't know. However you can determine whether someone's warm just by looking at them in the face is just.
Okay.
Let them talk to me. Then
All
I'll
right.
go ahead and tell you if they're warm or not. So.
All right, I'll go with, why did you give him high warmth?
That was me before I got old and gray.
Okay.
Tied it up. He's definitely working in some type of skilled job. So that's probably me at 35.
All right. Okay.
And I'm a hell of a warm guy.
All right. Who wants to tell us why you gave him low warmth? The expression on his face. All right. How about who gave him high competence? Why'd you give him high competence?
Because I think for the same reason that he doesn't look that warm to me, he does look like he has a strong sense of confidence about whatever work he does. And so his focused look made me think about him being highly confident.
All right. Did anyone give him low competence?
Yeah, he looks like someone who just got out of prison.
All right. I want to hear why the chair gave him low competence.
I definitely have a bias, and one of my biases is that I have a real issue with tattoos. So even though I can't read what his says, it's just, even if I have family members with them, I'm just not a visible tattoo kind of person. And,
Okay.
and I draw negative conclusions from that.
Okay. All right.
How many years and I'm tied it up? If I
But do
didn't.
I ever see your tats?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Oh, most certainly.
No.
I've got tats from the sleeves down. Okay. Next meeting, I'll make sure that you get to see them.
We don't need to take that too far. I mean, really, I'm being honest here.
Okay.
There was, when I was the CEO of United Way, one of the HR rules that I was behind, no visible tats. And one day in the summer, I was chatting with this absolutely beautiful young African-American woman. She had on a beautiful sleeveless dress, and she had boots up to her knees. Now, I realize that people wear boots year-round, but I did make a comment about it. And she left, and she says, "You don't know, do you?" I'm like, "No, what?" She says, "My legs have tattoos." So again, it's a bias that I'm aware of and work on, but it's there.
And we know that's one of the things that has evolved over the years, where we know in the work environment there were no tattoos allowed. In the military, there weren't any allowed. And we've seen that evolve as well.
Policy regarding
Sorry?
tats. I say even CPD recently changed their policy regarding tattoos.
Right.
I mean, it's, yeah.
Right. Well, yes.
Professionals, I mean, I was in the public defender's office, and young attorneys all have. I mean, there's one young man who's an excellent attorney, and he has sleeve, leg, and the ladies have, tattoos. So it's really changed. It's and
it's your age,
It's an age thing. Generally, what a tattoo communicated to folks our age compared to, millennials is a totally different thing.
Right.
Tattoos, multiple piercings.
Used to be just sailors, right? Back in the day, or motorcyclists, bikers. The big reveal. John Fetterman, master's degree in public policy from Harvard, served in AmeriCorps. He's currently the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. He's currently running for governor.
I wish I could vote for him.
Yeah, he's pretty phenomenal. He was the mayor of Braddock, PA. The tattoo on his arm is the zip code of Braddock, PA. So he's currently running for governor, and he does smile. I won't say since we're recording, but there is a scientifically proven thing called RBF. Just write that down and then Google it. Some of us know what that is. I think we all know who this is. And he definitely had high warmth. Unfortunately, that's how he got some of his victims.
Wait, excuse me.
Yes.
I apologize for just shouting.
No, no.
Can we determine who thought that was a warm face? Because nothing about that says warm.
Well, that's because we already know who he is. But if you watch the special about him, or if you've read about him,
Right. No, I know, but I'm curious to know who on this board put that this was a warm person.
I knew who he was, and so I actually did two scores. But if I was just looking at it objectively and I didn't know who he was, and for me, it's the smile.
Smile comes off to me as he's a weasel, and I didn't know who he was.
I feel like I know who he was, and that's why I'm curious, because I know who he was. I know who he was, who he is, whatever. But nothing about that smile says trust me, and I think that's really. Well, no, I know. I'm like umbrella arching. Nothing about this person says I'm good, just by this picture alone.
I thought he was testifying at a congressional hearing.
But that's why he was never have picked you
Well,
as
I'm
a
also-
victim.
Yeah.
right. And no kidding, I've presented this to several thousand people, and many people don't know who he is. And the majority, not all, a lot of people, there are some who feel the way you feel, but scientists say a genuine smile reaches your eyes, and certainly his smile reaches his eyes. Some people did pick up that, yeah, there's something a little off about him, but that's how he, that's how he got the majority of his victims. Now, what I'd like for you to consider is juxtaposing him with John Fetterman. And I'm walking down the street. It's kind of dark out. John Fetterman is 6'8". But he's also a social worker. I don't know that. I'm a little person. I'm walking down the street. This guy's in a suit. John Fetterman has the look on his face. And if I'm going by the bias of the bald guy with the goatee and what the media tells me about what that type of person, what he looks like and what he might be, I'm going to go to this guy and say, hey, can you help me, sir? And he's like, I sure can. Stab, stab, stab.
Can I say, I guess this is.
Influence who you would probably gravitate to, too. So I think that plays a part in it. So, like, when I looked at him, I immediately was like, okay, he's low, But in John Fetterman, I was like, he looks all right to me. But that's just because of who I know and who I associate with in my past experiences. So
Absolutely.
I think that plays a part.
It does, just like, well, that's who he was. And other people I've facilitated this class with, it's who you are and where you come from and your lived experiences. One person said, I go to church with people that look like Mark and John Fetterman. So you're absolutely right. But if I've never been exposed to somebody like that, then, or, I know people like, Ted Bundy, I might be kind of messed up.
Well, I had to change his competency over to high.
Well, I think one of the things that is kind of going unsaid here about, Ted Bundy in the picture is the bias to believe that white people are inherently good, right? Like that
could play
that's
into
the
it.
issue, and that kind of ties what we're doing here, right? Like the example of walking down the street, I would probably cross the street if I saw him because of experiences in this country with people and ideas and politics of people who look like him.
Which one?
But John Fetterman's white.
No, the Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
I see Ted Bundy coming, I'm probably going to cross the street because I know you probably, or my bias tells me, or not my bias rather, but maybe my experience tells me that someone who looks like you probably believes that someone who looks like me does not deserve to share the same space, and your attitude is going to treat me accordingly because that is what I have experienced, right?
Right.
And so when, scientists are talking, and I'm really curious to see, what the result is about this woman, but like, for example, like you're talking about scientists and the smile, right? Like, it's kind of like how we, this woman is smiling in this picture, but black women in particular there's a societal issue that because a black woman's not smiling, she's mean, she's aggressive, she's this, she's that, blah, 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 right?
Right.
Meanwhile, the devil can be smiling in your face in the form of Ted Bundy. Oh, sure, I'm gonna get in your car. All that kind of stuff, right? It's just.
No, you're right.
It's clear that, there's a kind of racialized kind of deal that we're dealing with people based upon whiteness and what society says about.
There's a lot of intersectionality going on.
But the only difference there, though, is if my memory serves me correct, there were some African-American victims with Ted Bundy. I think there was at least one or two. So,
Yeah, I
But,
don't know.
yeah.
I don't know. So let's move on and see what results we got with contestant number 3. High warmth? Okay. All right, the majority. Why did you give her high warmth?
She just seems like has an outgoing personality, a nice personality. She seems like she's intelligent.
Okay. Anybody else? What gave you that thought? Were there physical characteristics? What?
Yes.
I'm always going to root for black women, so I wrote her high.
Okay.
That's just true.
Go ahead on, Aaron. I hear you.
So I'm always going to mark you high.
Okay, but the smile.
Yeah.
What else?
Her gesture, her hand
Her eyes.
gesture.
Her gesture.
I just knew who she was, so that kind of,
Did it for you.
yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Did anybody give her low warmth? No? Okay. How about competence? High competence? Okay. So across the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much like to the doctor's point, I mean, I like to make an informed decision, so I'm not going to look at a picture and all of a sudden create a whole narrative about a person, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it.
So what I find also sort of like the order that these were selected in and the representations or whatnot, much to his point, like it's a little problematic that it still sort of seems like we want to perpetuate that because this guy's white, he's probably gonna be better for you or whatnot in this situation, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm really curious to see where this one goes too.
Except you guys are discounting John Fetterman. You all weren't very nice to him.
I was.
Well, you two were. Okay. Oh, now
Like
you
him?
all are all in. Okay. Okay.
That's all.
I was today years old when I saw your responses to him, but okay. Mae Jemison, but you're right. Now, her body language, she's leaning in, her smile, her confidence, her outfit, those all play into how we perceived her. And of course, for those of us who knew who she was or knows who she is, we know what type of person she is and know she was not the astronaut who drove across country in a Depends in that situation. All right. So let's take a moment to take a quick break. How long, Chair Jackson? 3:45. And we will continue. Thank you.
I will make a note of this at our next meeting, and the chair takes responsibility for this. I'm still not in the habit of checking my city email as regularly as I should. And so Mr. Strickland sent an email much earlier today, this morning, basically indicating that he had a work commitment that he simply could not move for today's meeting. So his absence today will be considered an excused absence. Ms. Clark?
All right, thank you. So the next slide will have a word, and once I put that word up on the screen, what I'd like for you all to do is to give me the first reaction that comes to mind. Annoying, thank you. You want to punch her in the face?
Oh, violence.
Violence.
Overused.
Overused. Is that it?
Offensive.
Offensive. Racist. No other thoughts? Don't feel bad because that's my name, okay?
Animal lover.
Animal lover. Okay. All right. So I wanted to put that word up there, especially after we just finished the exercise that we did. Because it's contemporary and because it's, we see it all the time now, it is really overused. And people have different thoughts about it. But here we go. I happened to run into that person this summer while traveling, and he had that T-shirt on, and I couldn't let him get away without taking a picture. So there we go. Not all Karens are alike. All right, so section 4, the implicit association test, also known as the IAT. Now, the implicit association test is a tool that has caused consternation in a number of participants over the time that we have presented this particular class. But the first thing I would like for you to do, I have an exercise before we get into the IAT. And this exercise is about implicit associations. So I would like for you to quickly do this exercise, looking at it, and write the words that match those 5 words on the left side of the screen. And then we'll see how quickly, in fact, let me set my timer to see how quickly you can complete them.
What does work mean to us? Yeah, you're done already in your head?
You know what? That's right.
Yeah, because that's not really clear.
You're right. That's my fault. I didn't give you the matching words, so I'll just put them. Right, but I didn't.
No, I thought we were.
I didn't give you the matching parts of them, so I'll just put them up there. So A went with, and 7 years ago, the Ohio State mascot, of course, is Brutus. B went with Sting. Dolt goes with Sage. Dolt is a slow person. Sage is an incredibly smart person. Wait. Yeah.
I thought Dolt was a car.
That's a Colt. And Cleveland Cavaliers. So I apologize. I messed up. I didn't give you all the matching portions to that. But implicit associations, again, like the peanut butter and jelly, so I was supposed to give you the other side of that. So we'll move forward from that, and that's okay, because I think we'll have more of a discussion about the implicit association test.
The mascot, because I'm not from here, so I was really trying to get that B word out. I was like, what is it? I don't remember that name. Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. How long have you lived here?
8 years.
8 years.
I mean, I've seen him around. I've said hi, but I mean, you're doing that zip code.
Bias, right?
Bias right now, because
I am.
because I live in Ohio, I should just know about them.
Yeah, who's responsible for him?
Love it.
He's lived here 8 years and he doesn't know.
I would have gave you 8 years in Ohio, but not 8 years in Columbus, Ohio.
All right.
Okay.
Mark, you have some work to do.
Fair.
All right, so let's do an introduction of the implicit association test. I know you all have taken it, but for our guests here today, it's a quick minute and 34 seconds.
Implicit Association Test, or IAT. In a classic version of the IAT, research participants are asked to make two types of judgments. The first is whether a face they see on the computer screen is that of a black person or a white person, and the second is whether a word they see on the screen is a good word or a bad word. A good word would be like love, joy, or honest, and a bad word would be like poison, agony, detest. The trials with the faces, black or white, are intermixed with the trials with the words, good or bad. And participants must use the same two keys on the computer for both judgments. So in one part of the test, participants will use one key to indicate black if a black face is shown, and use that same key to indicate good if a good word is shown. Then a different key will be used for white for face trials and bad for word trials. In a different part of the test, things are arranged differently. Now, participants use one key to indicate black and bad, and the other key to indicate white and good. This experiment assesses how easily the participants can manage each of these links. Do they have an easier time putting white and good together, and so using the same key to indicate both, than putting white and bad together? It turns out that the second combination is easier for white participants and many African American participants as well. This seems to suggest that the participants arrive at the experiment already primed to associate each race with a certain evaluation and respond more slowly when the experiment requires them to break that association.
So even with this introduction, what the narrator was telling us that both white and black people had an implicit preference towards European Americans. So I'd like to pose this question. Why do you think that is? Yes.
So in terms of how we were graded or whatever, was a part of it the speed?
Yes.
That was the determination, how quickly you made a determination?
Yes.
Okay.
So the test that you're all talking about, was that included on the...
Yes.
Now, we'll get to that. Let's not get ahead of ourselves if you don't mind.
This today, and there was nothing in there.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll definitely discuss that. But with reference to this introduction and them talking about black and white, where both black participants and white participants had an implicit preference towards European Americans, why do you think that is?
I think it's social conditioning. It's just like the psych experiment with the children with the dolls, and they're asked to pick up and label which doll is beautiful, the white doll or the black doll. And we live in a society that you cannot get out of or extricate yourself from this idea that black is close to badness, and that white is goodness or a standard of goodness. And so that's a hard thing for people to break free from. We see it even in educators. Black and white educators all have bias against black children and acting out and suspend and expel black children at higher rates. Like, we see these same patterns across the board in our professions.
Absolutely. My job here is done. No, that is correct. And the same with gender career. Even as career women, in that implicit association test, many women, as career women, have an implicit preference towards men and career, and women staying at home, even with having mothers that went to work. So, very good. Yes, social conditioning. Thank you for that. All right, so the implicit association test, yes, does measure the relative strength of association between pairs of concepts. The stronger the implicit association, the less time it takes to pair and less matching errors. So the more comfortable you are, again, with, let's say, African American and bad words, or in the case of you all took the weapons test, African Americans and weapons, you were able to do that, well, maybe more quickly, versus a weaker implicit association takes more time to pair, and you might have more matching errors. Now, with this, there are two main ways that we can measure implicit bias in understanding our biases. Now, this is just a tool. It's not something that I want you to take and run with and say, put yourself in a box and say, I'm racist, or I'm this, or I'm that. You can consider it as predictive, and just leave it at that.
A couple of questions.
Please.
I was just curious as I was taking the test. I'm sure there's research on how valid is the test? That is, does the same person show consistently the same results if they take it, say, 4 times in a month?
I'm glad you asked that. And I do have, if you can hold that question, I have some information about that in the next slide. Okay, great. So in this slide, this is from the actual website. Some of you may remember. Currently, there are 15 different categories. The test is currently put together by Harvard University. The authors of the test is Mazrin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald. They're also the authors of Blind Spot, Hidden Biases of Good People, and you see mine is all tabbed up. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, I recommend that you get it. They developed this, I think, in 89 or 95. I don't remember the date exactly. But the board was asked to take 2 different tests, the weapons implicit association test and the transgender implicit association test. I know the print is very small there, so I have it here for me. So the weapons implicit association test requires the ability to recognize white and black faces and images of weapons or harmless objects. The transgender implicit association test requires the ability to distinguish photos of transgender celebrity faces from photos of cisgender celebrity faces. And for anyone that's interested, outside of this room, you can Google Take a Test or Project Implicit, and then click on Take a Test. Yes?
Why were these two tests in particular? I could understand the weapons, but for this body, why were these two for us? Out of all the tests, why these two?
It was just a choice.
Oh, it was
that
just
we made.
random? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, weapons was intentional,
Yes.
but the second one was kind of random. We didn't want to go with the race one, so we thought we'd pick something different. Yeah, great question. And you know what? I'm going to move forward so I can answer your question, and then I'll go back. All right, the disclaimer. which Chair Jackson, I think, will help with your question as well. So, and then I'll go back. So usually people don't read the disclaimer because it's in small print. Now, Pastor Rich asked the question, will the answers always be the same? No. Let me read, well, I can't say no for sure, but let me read the disclaimer that comes up when you've completed the test. It says, these IAT results are provided for educational purposes only. The results may fluctuate and should not be used to make important decisions. The results are influenced by, Lord, the print's kind of small, variables related to the test. For instance, the words or images used to represent categories, and the person, that's you. So are you tired, or what you may have been thinking about before taking the IAT? So how does the IAT work? The IAT measures associations between concepts. For instance, in the transgender test, lost my place, between concepts cisgender and transgender people, and evaluations, for instance, good words or bad words. People are quicker to respond when items that are more closely related in their mind share the same button. For example, an implicit preference for cisgender people relative to transgender people means that you are faster to sort words when cisgender people and good words share a button relative to when transgender people and good words share a button. Studies that summarize data across many people find that the IAT predicts discrimination in hiring, education, healthcare, and law enforcement. However, taking an IAT once, like you just did, is not likely to predict your future behavior well. So, I would recommend taking it again and maybe a third time, because the first time you take it, and I wish they had put in the disclaimer, you're getting used to the mechanics of it. So that may affect how your results turn out. So I would definitely recommend, now that you've kind of immersed yourself in it or baptized for the first time, go back now that you're used to or familiar with how the test works, go back and do it again. And that may help you.
We have the link. We will have the ability on our own just to go in and.
Absolutely.
Including choosing a different test if we want to?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So does that disclaimer help?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess with that disclaimer, the two questions, on any test are validity and its predictive power. But could you help me? I'm struggling with, the disclaimer seems to cut the test legs out from under it. That is that if the results fluctuate on a test, that's usually validity is measured by its consistency.
As in scientific method, yes.
Yeah, so if I take your temperature and I take it in an hour, then I know, what your temperature is. If it's jumping up and down, I start wondering if the thermometer is broken, because if you're 98.6 now and 100.6 in 20 minutes and 150 and, if it's jumping, I'm like, that's really unlikely. So if your scores are fluctuating, help me to understand how the test is a valid test.
It would, please.
Okay,
Yeah, that'd help.
So when we talk about validity, it's whether or not the instrument measures what it purports to measure. So that would be all of the different categories. Reliability refers to whether or not you take the test over and over again and get the same results. So with the implicit association test, what I usually recommend is that people take it at least somewhere between 5 to 7 times and then take the average of their scores to give a more accurate determination of where they are on that spectrum of, strongly, aligning one way or strongly aligning another way. I typically agree, you don't take it just one time because that's not a true accurate assessment of where you are on those various scales, but you are going to need to take it multiple times and then take the average of what your score is that time, and that'll give you a more accurate depiction of where you are.
Would you recommend taking it like 7 times and put some space in between them, or just
Yeah.
shoot 7 in a row?
I would say 7 times, put some space in between it, just when you get some free time, go and take it and, live a couple more days, take it again, and just see where you are. That's usually what I tell my students to do, because, it's a test. There's always going to be different variables and factors that impact the results. There's different things that impact your life that's going to determine how you respond quickly to the I and the E on the test, and so all of that plays a part in the results.
I've taken the test 3 times. This is my 3rd time through a training for some type of, event. And I found that each time I got a little bit better. And matter of fact, the first time I was pleasantly surprised at myself. But then the second time, the third time, I've seen, some noticeable improvement. So I took that is that, this program's working.
Yeah.
But I
Thank you,
should,
Doc. I was going to say something similar, but you were able to say it a lot more succinctly. I was going to say, definitely take it again. So, yeah, absolutely. Please.
I have a question. When you take the test, there's good and bad, and then you have a picture and a word. I was looking at the word rather than the picture. Is that what I should have been doing? Do you look at both? Because you see what I'm saying? There's a good word and a bad word, and then there are pictures on top of those. And because if you push the wrong thing, then there's an X and you have to push another word. You see what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, so usually my fingers are resting on the I and the E, and then I'm
Correct.
just looking directly at the screen. So as they pop up, I'm usually just going like,
Right.
I don't know how to explain it, but
Are you don't even have to, for good and bad, you don't even have to look at the pictures, you just look at the words. And the words can be good and bad, and you're just hitting words rather than linking the pictures and the words.
You don't get pictures and words. You either get the picture.
you get the
Or the
picture or the
word.
word,
Or the-
and then you're clicking
Oh, I
the-
see okay.
So it's usually a bad word, and then a picture, and then a good word, and then a picture, and then you're clicking.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, never mind. I got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And when I think about it, the other thing that I think about is, since we're trying to measure something that happens mostly in the subconscious, even though we're consciously taking the test, that's the reason for the speed. Because if you give me time, I'm going to choose the right one.
Exactly.
So it's hard to test you when you're unconscious. That's the reason for the speed of it, I think.
It is.
Yes, please.
To what Mr. McIntosh just said. So I've had a problem in my own work with this test, right? And so he said this test is determining things that we do or think in the subconscious, right? But they also really impact our conscious decisions too, correct? Right? So when we talk about the experience of using implicit bias as a corrective tool, right? Or a tool to better understand, tool to equip folks, whatever, this is usually in response to probably issues of explicit discrimination, would you say? Because in the work that this has been applied to, that I do, it's to shift cultures in the workplace that has employed a tool such as this, but other tools as well, to shift culture in the workplace based upon experiences of explicit discrimination. So when we say that, the implicit bias is really bringing out your subconscious, but it's also about the things you do consciously though, right?
I would say it's predictive of what could happen, but Doc?
So I always use it in such a way that it raises your awareness of where you are subconsciously on various issues in terms of these different characteristics. Because a lot of people just don't know where they are. And once you raise it to that level of awareness, then you are better equipped and able to address and provide counter messaging to those biases that you might have. And so I don't know if it necessarily is designed to shift explicit biases, whether, that's a part of it, but initially it is to raise awareness of where you are internally and at a subconscious level.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for really getting down to the nitty gritty. So, and it's where you may be, as opposed to, yes, I'm racist, or yes, I'm against certain groups. So that's what I want to tell people. Don't allow yourself to be cornered with that, but think about, yeah, I might have this problem, or, well, I'll get to that with the results that we have on the screen. So what I've put on the screen next, for those who are watching this, these are some screen prints just from the Transgender Implicit Association, some of the sorting instructions. So first they gave us pictures of transgender celebrities, and then they gave us pictures of cisgender celebrities, and then they gave us words, good words and bad words, and then they reminded us, or gave us the pictures again of cisgender and transgender people. And I did not make screen prints of every screen that you went through, but this is an example again of one of the screens where they did the pairing. Again, this is part 3 of 7, where on the left side, they were asking you to press the letter E for bad words or cisgender people, and the letter I for good words or transgender people. So on the next screen, which I don't have a picture of, what they would do would be to pop up a picture. Maybe it's a picture of one of the transgender celebrities, and if it was a picture of the transgender celebrity, then you would press the letter I. Maybe they put up one of the bad words next. Then you would press the letter E. So you would need to go through making the choices for that. Now, this is an example of the results here, and each of the board members would have received their results. So for this result, it said, your data suggests a moderate automatic preference for cisgender people over transgender people. Okay, I admit, I self-report. This is my results. I was a little stuck by that, but as I was going through the test, I know what kind of got me is that I have a terrible memory, so I couldn't remember who was cisgender and who was transgender. So I got a number of red X's as I was going through. So that kind of slowed me up. Or that could be just me making an excuse. So I would want to, as a person, go through and take that again, because I would have to say, I don't think I have a problem with transgender people. And then, then I start thinking to myself, do I sound like the people that say, I have a black friend, I have transgender friends, but I really need to consider that. Do I have some type of bias towards them? So that would be a consideration I would have to consider. Would anyone like to share either their transgender results or their weapons results? Certainly you don't have to. That's something, it's personal, but I wanted to self-report on myself. And then, of course, we've already gone through the disclaimer, which I think is very important, again, for people just taking this for the first time, and to understand that don't put too much on yourself. There are reasons why you may have gotten the results that you got. Yes.
I took the transgender test twice. The first time I took it, I got the moderate, and then the second time it said a weak automatic preference for cisgender people. And then, and I was upset with a weak automatic preference for cisgender because I thought to myself the same thing you did. I could care less, you know. And then I did start doing that review process in my head, like, maybe the test is wrong, maybe. And I didn't understand until Dr. Jones explained that, that the more you take it, maybe you'll do better. So now that I understand this, maybe I need to take it more than 2 times. But then I thought to myself, well, what's a test no? You know?
And that's all normal. If you do more research on it,
yeah,
that's the process, almost like the stages of grief, you know?
I mean, because they asked us to check it, or to evaluate it, and I thought, no, I know darn well I'm not biased. I don't have a prejudice against transgender, so then I totally put it, I said, nah, this is wrong. So that's how I reacted to it, you know. But then really, it does make you think, I need to take a look at this. So it's a good tool, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, Chair?
I'm glad I have a mask on. I am so glad I have a mask on. And so does the camera. So as I shared with you, and I didn't print out, you know, my results, and I only took it once, and I questioned the results, you know, on both. And with you, I was specifically talking about the transgender one. My personal experiences, my professional experiences, how much work I've done, you know, in this area myself, and so I was pissed. And even having heard, you know, taking it 5 or 7 times, I just don't know if I would do that, and especially when you talked about the speed. I mean, I have some other issues that may have a factor, you know, there. I would share that when I leave here today, and when I look at what's on my personal plate of work, I don't necessarily see a time where it's like, okay, I've got downtime today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take this test again. And maybe I'm somewhere with Pastor Rich. I'm not comfortable with this test. I mean, who am I to question the legitimacy, you know, of it, because I'm not an expert, but I just wasn't comfortable with sort of the whole premise.
Words of comfort for everybody who didn't like their test results. So I think we need to reframe the way that we're thinking about the results that come back from the test, either the slight to automatic preference or the moderate preference. That does not mean that you are racist. It doesn't mean that you are some bad person. And I think that's the way a lot of people have been internalizing the results that they get. It is just basically bringing awareness of some subconscious level of ideas that you may possibly have. But what's most important is what you do explicitly with that. And so I would encourage everybody to keep doing what you're doing. So if you are automatically reframing and you're exposing yourself to counter messaging from that bias and you're behaving in the opposite direction, then you're already on the right path. So I just want to just give that to everybody. Just, you know, don't lean solely into the, oh my gosh, this test made me feel like this, because that's not what it is designed or what it should be make me feel like. Yes.
So I wanted to share mine because I think I'm on the opposite end. like I was super happy with mine. It made sense to me about who I am and where my heart is. I felt at least like I have a preference for transgender people over cisgender people. That's what the test told me. And then the test also told me that I have weak no, wait, not that one. Oh yeah, the suggested little or no automatic association between weapons and race, right? So I felt like from the work that I've done in my personal life and my understanding of the world, like this kind of correlates to how I feel like I show up for people. You know what I mean? So like I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm not gonna take it 7 times because I'm not gonna sit there and click, whatever to verify. But it confirmed the way I feel like I show up for people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
And Dr. Jones, you know what I've observed with the number of participants that I've had do the IAT? I've seen generationally younger people, especially with the race IAT, I've seen more of them be in the middle versus having strong preferences one way or another. Have you observed that?
I have too. And then for me, the first time I took it, it was a moderate preference for white. Then over the years, as I continued to give these trainings, now I'm like strong to moderate preference for Black people. So I think it's just something that we all evolve over time, and it can change. But I have seen that.
Yeah, I found that interesting. Younger people are like right in the middle, and I'm like, gives me hope. Yeah.
In giving these tests in certain environments and situations, with different groups of people, have you ever encountered someone that was just absolutely against taking an IAT because they did not want to know?
Yes. I had a woman who was like, nope, and she said, because it might tell me I'm racist.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I did. And, I'm not going to force anyone to do that. Yes.
I was just gonna, I've taken these a lot of times as well, and I think what Dr. Jones said, the point about educating yourself and checking your own internal workings, because I think that we don't want to dismiss what these tests tell us, because I think then we put ourselves in a dangerous position when it comes to down the road when we're looking at other actions. And by example, I'll say that society and how they perceive young Black men, for example. And these similar studies, just like this IAT test, have shown that people perceive young Black boys as being 4 to 6 years older than what they actually are. And so that by the time they are 12, they're being perceived as though they are 18, 19 years old. And so I'm just juxtaposing that with our thoughts about this, because I think it is easy to want to dismiss whatever negativity we might feel about these results. But I think the strong caution is just be aware that those same types of tests, though set in a different context, may inform some of what we're looking at in the future when we're asked to take a look at a scenario, knowing that these same sorts of tests are what shows us how our young Black children are perceived.
Right.
And that is important for placing our mental and emotional states in some of the work we'll have moving forward. So I would encourage folks, if you have the time, take the test again, if it helps you feel a little better about what it shows you. But these same types of examinations really are important when it comes down the road when we're asked to look at actions and then think about how might bias have played a role in this scenario.
Thank you for bringing that up. We call that the adultification, and for young Black girls as young as 5 are considered or not considered to need the same comforting as young white children or young white girls. So it's very distressing. So our last section, how can we address, or what can we do about addressing implicit bias? So just to remind you, taking shortcuts is also called heuristic thinking. So again, shortcuts or heuristic thinking is when that system 1 kicks in, or that fast brain. We know what it is. So remembering that fast brain is that system 1 where our conscious thoughts might not tell us that we have, a bias because our brains work too fast. So we need to keep that in mind. Whereas if we were in slow brain, it helps us to have rational thoughts. So we need to start recognizing that these shortcuts, really help to perpetuate implicit bias. So remembering how it works, the amygdala contacts the hypothalamus. That puts us in that fight or flight, or as the song says, should I stay or should I go? And, okay, generationally, who remembers that song? Okay, right, all right. Should I stay or should I go? Yeah, never mind.
Not thinking of a Brandy song.
No.
Twice.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
There's a Brandy song with that lyric anyway.
And it happens quickly, in less than a second. 15 milliseconds, that's how quickly that fast brain kicks in. That's what we're talking about. So, not sure when you're being biased? These are some times when it happens. When you're stressed, when you're about to make a big decision. It's any of these moments that we need to remind ourselves that we're likely to have biases kick in. So if we remember that, I'm sorry, because that's when I want to say, stop what you're doing, because you're about to ruin the image and the style that you're used to. So, it fits. If you're stressed, stop what you're doing. Take a moment and think about, breathe, mindfulness. All of those things are important. So if you're at work, there are a few common places that implicit bias can creep in, and you want to recognize those times. Interrupt your bias in the moment. As we talked about, the physical manifestations, the sweating, the increased heartbeat, the dilated pupils, the rigidness, all of those things that you all mentioned is what happens when we are in that fight or flight, or when we're stressed. So just like you can calm yourself when you're frightened, you can interrupt your bias in very much the same way, in stopping to breathe.
I know we're going to have cultural competency training,
Yes.
but I noticed on the slide, who you call on. But in the training that I've had over the years, I've noticed in groups, a real cultural difference between who speaks and who doesn't.
Yes.
And the need to call on people to give permission to speak or not speak, so that part of this training is really tied to cultural competency training, that it's not implicit bias to repeatedly call on someone who will otherwise be silent in a group because they don't feel, you're the authority. When you're leading, they don't feel permission to speak if the authority is speaking.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected. In fact, you might see some of the same materials covered. And I think that's a good thing, repetition. I think it's very important not just to have one session about these types of topics, which even some of the companies that we present to, we ask them, is this just an opportunity to check a box one time? We would prefer to come out to do a series so that this is something that we can be in front of you or whomever, so that we can start to build more of a knowledge for people to reflect on when they're in these types of situations. So understanding bias, having biases does not make us bad. And thank you for that remark, Pastor Rich. And remembering that every one of our decisions influences factors within and outside of our scope of awareness, remembering all of those 11 million bits of information that goes into our subconscious, whether we realize it or not, just walking down the street, seeing people, reading books, reading newspapers, listening to the radio, talking to your friends, what's on Facebook, TikTok, all of that are pre-existing reference points, are our limited versions of the truth. It could be something that was told to you by an adult when you were a child. And they're powerful because they're anchored by predominant beliefs and feelings. So how can you address it? First of all, self-reflection. Remember blind spot bias? It's fine to look at other people, but the first thing we all need to do is to look at the person in the mirror before you look at anyone else. And this is where I do my Oprah. You have biases and you have biases. Don't look under your chairs. There's no tickets under there. But seriously, we need to consider where we've come from, what we've been taught as we've been growing up. Do I have biases? And then have open and honest dialogues, into which I would thank you all for, again, partnering with us to come out here and the conversation that we've had today. This is what we enjoy doing. It's our passion. And then having training and leadership development. And then, of course, communication and education for everyone. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who it's by, so if anyone knows, please let me know. But you are not responsible for your first thought. And then my addition to this quote, or bias. So you're not responsible for your first thought or bias. But you are responsible for your second thought and your first action. Because this is where your power lies. So remember, if you're human, you have biases. And no one's saying that you can't have this. I self-report. I might go out here and have a biased thought about something. But you are responsible for that second thought and that action that you take. And that's your power. So there's some additional resources online and a book, one of my favorite NPR podcasts. Does anyone listen to that? Hidden Brain by Shankar Vedantam. And again, thank you very much for partnering with us at Citywide Training and Development. And if you wouldn't mind, I did leave you all with an evaluation form. If you could please do me the favor of completing that.
Are there any additional questions? So
And I'll be here if anyone does have any other
I
questions.
want to thank you so much for coming. I think this was the most interactive meeting that we've had since we've been here, and so I want to absolutely thank the members of the board for your openness, and sharing, your thoughts. Thought this was terrific. Please complete the evaluation. And I will take a little time to really just go over, I think it's only one matter. So I'm sure you're curious as to where we are in the process of the whole hiring process of the Inspector General. I will share this with you, that probably either the third or fourth week of January, because this is already, the second or third, this is already the first week of January. I would say that during the second or third week of January, and you will receive notice from Colleen but this will be broadly publicized to the community. There will be a virtual meeting of probably what will be 2 or 3 candidates. So this was done in the search for the police chief. So it will be advertised to the public. Same sort of process. It will be moderated by Matarian Wright. Many of you may know him better as Mo Wright. Members of the community will be asked to submit questions for Matarian to utilize. So I would encourage you, when you know when this is going to take place, that you watch and observe. But I will also ask you, please refrain from either submitting any questions beforehand, or if there is an opportunity for questions at night, and this is the reason why. And I know it's a fine point, but I did connect with the city attorney's office. My guess is that there are going to be over 6 of us that night watching this interaction. And if it is perceived that we have participated in that meeting, it could be perceived as a public meeting of the Civilian Police Review Board. So what I would suggest is that as you are watching, have a notebook or have something, write down any questions or thoughts, because I also want to reassure you that this entire board will have the opportunity to meet the 2 or 3 candidates and to interview them in person. At least right now, the plan is it will be an in-person interview. The virtual one, they would not be in town. That also would, wherever, they might be from. So the process is moving along. I'm comfortable with it. We're getting close. Okay? You probably will not receive an agenda for the February meeting, again, not knowing what we may or may not be doing at this particular time. I would just ask each of you that at this point, please plan on attending. And we could have a couple of different topics, but I need some leeway where that is concerned. Any questions, concerns, any thoughts that you want to share? We do have a few minutes remaining. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to do it. If you feel comfortable, Dr. Jones, I know that your committee met last night. Anything you want to share with us from that meeting? What's in America?
Yeah. I was going to say, did you want to say it? I'll mic toss to you. So the Training and Education Committee met yesterday, and we actually got a lot accomplished in, 15 minutes? It was a very efficient and effective meeting. But we reviewed some of the training topics that we already had, that you had already established. And then we put together a framework for topics moving forward. So right now, each of the committee members they have a chart that they're filling out where they're proposing some new topics. We're going to integrate them all, and we will have that finalized by our next meeting, which is January the 31st, before our February meeting. Mark, Mac, you all want to chime in?
I think you hit it out the park, knocked it out the park. And we also talked about initial training that we should have prior to a case coming before us.
Okay.
And then ongoing training, maybe with Mr. Furby,
Okay.
to update us.
So some additional training before we would hear our first case. Is that what I just heard you say?
Yeah, so we broke it down year 1, year 2, and year 3.
Okay.
So what should be covered during year 1, what should be covered during year 2,
okay.
and what should be covered during year
Okay.
3 for
Okay.
the CRB.
Okay.
Furby gives the police department pretty frequent updates of things which we also want to incorporate into our structure.
That you want to receive?
Incorporate into our structure.
Okay,
So we're getting the same updates that the police are when it comes to the law.
okay. Okay. Anything else? Well, it sounds as if you had a very productive 15
I
minutes.
tell you, we were efficient.
And Dr. Jones cracked the whip.
And I understand that you had attendance issues with your meeting, so you have another meeting scheduled?
Yes, we had a brief meeting, the Community Engagement Committee, several weeks ago, but we have one scheduled at 4:00 this Monday evening. But at our last meeting, we briefly set out our goals, what we want from the community, what we want to give them, what we want from them, and who do we want to reach. So I'm going to be, I gave myself the task of trying to figure out some sort of an outline, and then we're going to figure out who we want to reach.
And one of the things you may want to, I don't want to say add, early on, Mr. Thomas specifically suggested sort of what is the, I don't want to call it public relations efforts, but literally what are we going to need in terms of getting the word out to the community on a variety of issues? Because I do think we're going to need to come back to the city in terms of resources around that, whether it's their communications department or whatever, because we simply don't have staff for that right now. We might, the Inspector General might in the future, but we don't. But I would like for you to consider that.
In our meeting, we did talk about that. Probably talked about like some grassroots stuff. Like, for instance, when Ms. Younger was talking about, you know, the people that we would talk to or bring in front of us, you know, we talked about how there's a huge East African community here and a Tibetan community. Like, how do we reach those community leaders to get the word out about this office and what they do? So we are starting to brainstorm some, you know, putting kind of the onus on some of the community leaders to help with spread the word until the infrastructure to do it via the office is in place.
Thank you. And Pastor Nathan, there's some very specific information that Mr. Tobias wanted to make sure that you received because you chair the professionalism. And so, Mr. Tobias, I did not forward that information. So if you would send it directly to the chair, I would appreciate it. We still have maybe 15 minutes. So Colleen informed me that everyone has now completed their scenario training because it's our last meeting, and I think Colleen actually, went through it, and our newest board member. So I just wanted to throw it open. If there was anyone who wanted to share your thoughts or feelings about the scenario training, and even something else for you to think about. Was it sufficient? Do you think that there should have been something else involved with that? Still keep in mind that we have not covered the topic of de-escalation, which also kind of comes up with scenario, training. But any thoughts you want to share?
I think the de-escalation would have been very helpful before, because in the scenarios that we encountered, there was no way that, I had any clue what to do. So I was just reacting pure on instinct. And, even in that little scenario that's not real, I felt it was very real. I ended up letting the first guy go, shot 2 people, and tased the guy in the end because I panicked, and it was really eye-opening, the split-second decisions that you have to make.
Anyone else? I believe, since I was in the same session with you, and we were not in the room at the same time, but I think that the actions that we took were similar for the different scenarios. And I didn't feel that I panicked. I mean, I made a judgment call around my life. You know, was I being threatened? And I did use weapons that others, you know, probably wouldn't. But I don't know. The adrenaline was flowing, you know, certainly, and I'd done this once before. And I was really pleased that the scenario training was different than what Dr. Jones and Ms. Burns and I had gone through. I think I actually like this, well, I don't know, but better, but I did think it was very, you know, educational. And I'm willing to share this one with you because it completely caught me off guard. If you had the scenario where you had the two gentlemen, they didn't have weapons, they had been drinking, they were intoxicated, and they were basically fighting.
Yeah.
So in that incident, I used the taser, and so the sergeant said, you used the appropriate, you know, he felt the appropriate weapon. And I'm not going to sure what he then did, but it was kind of like something, I mean, it was, and this actually happens to officers, but boy, did it take me aback. So in that scenario, there was an African-American police officer and there was a Caucasian officer. The African-American officer's back was to me, and he appeared to be the aggressor. But the question was, why did you tase, and it was the African-American, so many more times than whatever? And that just, I was just shocked by the question. And according to the trainer, I gave the appropriate answer, but it made me stop and think. That's all you know, I could say. And I was just surprised that that was a part of the training, but I thought it was a good part of the training. I don't know if that happened to anyone else in your sessions, but it was. Yes?
I had a similar incident. I think I was using the baton for most of the training. And I felt they asked me a similar question, not the same thing, but they kind of really came. Well, what happened was, I think it was the drunk one. They brought me in, they sat me down to mildly debrief me, if they would, a police officer who was in that situation. And I forget the exact specifics, but it really came across like trying to outthink the media or people who are recording or all of these things. And it was like a really kind of like aggressive, like, why did you do this? Da, 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 da. Are you racist? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, why are y'all asking me that? Like, and you know, I'm saying, I'm coming from the perspective of a black person, like, no, this is how the people are going to treat you, or blah, 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 this is what we do it. And it was very like, chill out. You know, it was very aggressive in that moment, and it was uncomfortable. I was like, what are y'all doing? You know?
Okay. Yes.
I also sort of had a really uncomfortable sort of experience. I'm glad that Colleen ended up doing me the solid of actually going with me to this thing because, I mean, thank you for coming in and talking about biases. I mean, I was hearing a lot of it, and there was a lot of, you know, for example, this was like my every single time that that gentleman was explaining something, like, it's the hardest job in the whole wide world, right? Why do I have to agree to that? Like, why is that important that you keep having to, like, you know, tell me that over and over again as if you're subliminally trying to get it in my head that you want me to lean that way or whatever the case may be. And I found that kind of weird and sort of a little off-putting.
Anyone else?
You know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, but the most important thing for me is it gave you a good perspective of what these police officers have to deal with in their daily routines. Because from someone standing on the outside just looking in, you know, and I've been guilty of that myself at times, you know, you can always say, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Blah, 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 blah. But until you've walked in their shoes, or at least in a sketch of their shoes, you know, you shouldn't say anything because there are so many factors, as we all found out, you know, that factor into every decision that they have to make, and there's certain consequences that are faced if they make the wrong decision, and we've both seen that. We've all seen that. So I really, from that perspective, it just gave me another outlook And I've even had a talk with some of my peers who just come off the block, you know, just saying crazy things. And I told them, so hold on, wait a minute. Now, I want you to really think about what you're saying here. I said, because I just came off of some training, you know, and I had to kind of, in a mild way, walk in their shoes. And I said, it's a lot easier to stand on the outside, you know, looking in and say what should have been done until you actually walk in those shoes. I think that I really enjoyed it. I like looking from perspective on both sides of the fence.
I so agree. And I would use the term enjoyed it. I actually did. Here, and then Dr. Jones. Here, Mary.
I thought that the individuals who were there that day, the officers were, there was I wish I could remember their names, but the sergeant, and then there was a female officer, she was a black female. She was so professional and and she did such a wonderful job. I learned so much. And we did one scenario, and then they explained it to me, and of course, I didn't know what I was doing, but they explained it to me, and then we actually redid that scenario. And I received a lot of insight, and I didn't feel that they had an agenda. They were simply explaining and teaching, and I thought it was a really worthwhile experience. It was positive.
Dr. Jones?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this before in terms of the training, but I know we had a couple. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more diversity in the scenarios in terms of whether or not you should use force or you should not. Because there's a difference between training and conditioning somebody. And I felt as though the training was more a conditioning to respond to a threat, even if it was a perceived threat, not an actual threat. Because there was even one of the scenarios, and I don't know if you all did it, but there was a guy, he was basically cutting himself in another room, and I tased the guy. That was my response, and the response was, "This guy is a threat. You should have shot him." And I'm like, "But he's not a threat to me, and I was over in the other room." And so I just think that there should have been a little bit more diversity in that response, because I don't think that at that point he needed help. That was my perspective. I was not who he was harming himself. And so I just think there should have been more of a diversity in the scenarios and the responses that were appropriate to those scenarios.
I did have that, but I will ask you this, because I think he was actually in a bathroom.
Yes.
But he got up and he moved towards me. So at one point he was just cutting, but then he stood up and he had knife in his hand. So certainly we had a conversation around, this was de-escalation, if we'd had the de-escalation training, first. And also an excellent example when it would have been great to have had a mental health professional with you. And I believe that the sergeant said that was an actual situation that 2 officers had responded, where in our case there was only one. So yes, Aaron, you've got a minute or two.
Yeah, just a second. That point, what you're making about that scenario, that was actually really troubling for me, and I mentioned it while we were there, because that's not the troubling part was not the scenario, it was how they positioned the mentally ill person as being dangerous to everyone else. And so in that moment, I'm like, oh, y'all probably need some updated training about what we know about suicidal ideation and who is actually in danger in these moments. And so that really stuck out to me about what is happening in the training and what messages they're getting in these moments.
Listen, thanks to each of you for sharing. Yes?
Something
Oh,
she
Brooke, I'm
wanted to
sorry.
say.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say the exact same thing that Dr. Jones said, because it came up in our training where we asked, how, of all the trainings that you all do and the scenario-based things, how many of these require use of force? And I would love if we as a board could, because they videotaped us, which I don't ever want to see those videos, but I'm wondering if they videotape, just as a matter of course, because I think it would be interesting for us to be able to get exposed to some of those non-force intervention scenarios that they take officers through as well, because they told us they had them, but those were not the ones that we did.
So I will share so we don't lose it, and I don't know if I would suggest that your particular suggestion just now go to this committee to be included. I'm not going to make a note about it. I'm sorry?
So noted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think we've come just to the end of our 3 hours. Again, thank you. Great start to the new year. At this point, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? You moved? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.